Hi, everyone. Good afternoon from lovely Vienna. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Making It in Austria. Today, I have an honor to welcome our next guest, Maggie Childs. Welcome, Maggie.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. This is the 58th episode, if I'm not wrong. So we're doing pretty well. So with welcoming guests all over the world. Maggie, so I would like to know a little bit about you. So what would you like to tell to the audience?
Well, there's plenty to tell. Let's see. To get into it from kind of the very beginning. I'm American. I'm from New York. That's my boyfriend. Right now, today I'm working from home. Usually I work from the office. Yeah, those are kind of, I guess, the current things. I live in Vienna in the 7th district. I used to live in the 2nd. I love living in Vienna. I also love being a citizen of the world, and I'm excited about our talk.
Awesome. So 7th is a really nice district for the ones who are watching this and don't know much about Vienna. So it's called it's like for the urban people. I know it's for the alternative people, right? It's like for people who think, I don't know, that's just my feeling, there's a few insights that I got along the way. So, and especially if you go to the streets of the 7th, what I like is like these kind of little shops and little restaurants, little places that are very unique to there. So, you cannot find them, all over the places. It has a unique charm, I would say, to the ones who don't know it.
Yeah, absolutely. Though the 7th, everyone makes fun of me and says it's, living in Bobo Central and whatever. But mostly, yeah, the thing I miss the most is what we were mentioning before, is having parks. We don't have any parks in the 7th, but otherwise I'm very happy living here.
Nice. So Maggie, this is the channel Making It in Austria, and I talk to people from all over the world who found their home here in Vienna. So how did you come to Vienna from the US? What brought you here?
Well, it wasn't really my choice at the beginning. I was brought here by my mother when I was 11 years old. And she was then working, her first job here was at the embassy. She was a speechwriter for the American ambassador. And she brought me and my brother with her, and we were completely fish out of water. I came from an elementary school that was an all-girls school with uniforms. And so I was kind of thrust into the Austrian public school system at 11. I didn't speak any German.
Wow.
I had never had to dress myself for school because we always had a uniform. That's so much easier. I'm still a big fan of uniforms. I think uniforms are really great. And the third thing is there were boys at the school, and it just totally freaked me out. And yeah, no, it was a very, very much a jumping in the deep end experience for both me and my brother. And yeah, it was pretty intense. The first 2 years, I'd say, were very much, we really welded together as a family, the three of us. But I think after 2 years, I can really say, at that age, at least, it's possible to really feel like you've arrived and you're there. My brother was 13, so that's also kind of on the cusp of the age when you can still really become a native speaker of your second language. Yeah, he also stayed in Austria actually, and now is married to an Austrian woman and has a son who's bilingual. And so yeah, we both decided to build a life here.
But that's an interesting story, if I may say so. Most of the people that I know coming from the US, they send their kids to the not the public school. They send it to the private school where the first language is English, and then they get up on German later on, or they keep moving through the world. And I see you coming to the public.
Well, Adela, I mean, that's what you do when you're rich. My family did not have that privilege. However, my mother is a very smart lady and a very resourceful woman. And she, after 3 years at the Austrian public school, she managed to get a job teaching English at one of the international schools, so that Austin and I, so my brother and I, could go there for free, because for teachers, there's no tuition for their kids to go to the international school. So my mom was very smart. She said, I'm never going to be able to afford this tuition, but I want my kids to have the luxury of a good education. And so she really kind of careered her way into teaching English at an international school, and all her students loved her. She was a hugely popular teacher. And I was very jealous, she loved all her students much more than us. No, I'm kidding. But you know how it is. But yeah, no, we were very, very lucky to have a mom who thought that was so forward thinking about it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah,
we were then able to go to international school after.
To all the moms out there. Yes, so you got me with this. So I listened to one of your episodes on Daheles. I hope I am pronouncing it correctly. And I then heard you speaking German, and I was like, okay, she moved to Vienna, and how does she speak that perfectly German? And I heard as well the Austrian, so because you three.
Yeah,
and I was like, I could guess, you know, so that's she speaking because I wasn't watching it on the computer. I was just listening to it.
Yeah, I mean, on the show, we really have to let it all hang out, right? Because we have one Swiss woman, one German woman, and myself, and I'm supposed to play the Austrian, right? But as an American, it's a little bit, I thought it was a little bit far-fetched, right? And I told my colleagues there, I said, you know, how much should I really? And they said, no, but you do it great. You sound totally Viennese. It's totally great. And I was like, okay, whatever. So I really like, I consider myself a New Yorker and a Viennese, and I don't think I have to choose there. I think that's just, some people have more complex identities. I think that's something that people like you and I can definitely relate to. If anyone who's lived for a longer period of time in different parts of the world feels an affiliation to that culture, and sometimes those are multiple cultures, and I think that should be totally fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think also that I have to thank my mother for. I mean, for sticking us in public school. We hated her for it. I mean, you know, like you said, most Americans and most English speakers send their kids to international school if they can afford it. However, my mom actually, even though I felt at the time she was just trying to talk me into it, she said, no, you don't understand. If you have a second language, it's like a superpower, right? And it is a superpower. I mean, I can, you know, I can be a completely different person if I want to be in German, you know, and that's the one thing. But also, you know, I noticed when I got to the Austrian school, all the other kids in my class, they at least spoke 2 languages. I mean, most of them, you know, because their parents' household, somebody was from the Balkans, or somebody was from Czech Republic or Slovakia, or, you know, we had one guy, we had 2 Turkish kids. We had, in my German as a foreign language class after school, we also had two girls from Swaziland. We had a really diverse group of kids. And so I felt like the biggest idiot in the class, because everyone else was learning their 3rd or 4th language, and I'm sitting there learning my 2nd. You know, I was just like, oh, I'm useless. But yeah, now I have a superpower too.
Yes. Thank you for mentioning that, because I believe in that too. So my husband and I, we are both from Bosnia. So of course I talk to my daughter Esma. So I talk her in Bosnian language, both of us. And then I want to send her as well to bilingual kindergartens. I believe that languages are the power. And if I could change a little bit in my life, would be to learn more languages, starting with Spanish, Italian, French. Just love languages, always loved it. And sometimes I find it surprising when parents just leave it as it is. So like they start teaching their kids their like first language or their home country language, and then just afterwards they just stop it because of the resources at the time and so on and so forth. And then it's kids with 6 or 8, so they just don't speak that language anymore, or just can understand. For instance, in my family, so I have cousins in Germany and in the Netherlands. She's living in the UK. So with one, I speak in German because she doesn't speak Bosnian language. And with other, I speak in English because she doesn't speak Bosnian either.
Yeah, I mean, amen to what you said. I mean, absolutely. I think language is the key to so much of unlocking not only, you know, a culture's potential in your life, but also, you know, unlocking your own possibilities, your own opportunities. And I think it's such a shame. In the United States, you see this all the time. I mean, in Europe, I gotta say, we are the continent of the blessed. We are the continent of the multilingual. Everyone believes in languages in this continent, you know. But in the United States, it's really, people, when they move there, there's this strange culture of assimilation where they say, you know, you have to leave everything behind from where you came from, and you have to become American and purely American, and your kids should only speak English and all this kind of stuff. And I think that's the biggest fallacy, you know, you can possibly have when you think about global migration. You want people to bring their culture with them. You want them to share that and enrich the new culture with those kind of influences. I think that's so much of what we benefit from. And that's how language evolves. It evolves by having people who speak multiple languages, speaking together. and it's such a shame if people lose their cultural heritage that way, and that level, on the language level.
I remember 3 years ago, I was for the first time in New York. I went to New York and to Boston, and then we visited some of our people that we know. They come from Boston, and they live now in Queens for most of their life now. And they mentioned, so when they were receiving the US citizenship, they asked them if they want to change the name. So that people, that is common. So I didn't know that is common, that you change completely your name and you take the kind of American name.
Yeah, and whenever you hear names in America that sound a little bit too clean, like Mr. Stone or Mr. Gold or it's usually a Jewish immigrant who didn't want to sound so Jewish, so they changed their name. This happened a lot of during the war and post-war, Second World War, the families that came there in that period, a lot of them had Polish names or these Germanic sounding names. And there were, any wave of immigration, as we all know in Europe, because we feel it now as well, every wave of immigration brings a lot of stereotypes, biases, hatred, fear, a lot of these kind of emotions. And so in order to mitigate that, the United States policy was assimilate, make everybody look the same, sound the same, which is a silly, I think nowadays is silly. Yeah. Perhaps at the time it made sense in some way. I think, and I hope for us as a society, as a civilization, that we've moved past that point of needing for everybody to feel like a Müller, Schmidt, whatever the cliche names are. I'm really glad my name is still Childs, and every time I go to the doctor they say Frau Childs, and I'm like, that's fine, it's okay, I'll just yep, that's me, it's okay. Margaret Childs. I enjoy it.
I said it from the beginning, so now it's 8 years that we live here, so I have 2 last names. So the first one is from my birth, so from my father, and the second one is from my husband. So we got married back in Bosnia, and I decided to keep mine first as well. And when we came here, so it's obvious, so I cannot hide it. I'm not an Austrian, so I can never be. So just look at my name and my last name, they figure out where I'm coming from, And I said to myself, I'm here, I want to embrace both. I cannot just leave that side behind me, and I'm happy that we continued on that, and that we continued building bridges with our home country to different foundations, mentoring.
But Adela, your last name fits in very well in Austria, because there's so many last names ending in ich, and Bosnian names. I adore Bosnian names because they are all very clearly Bosnian. I think like I have a very good friend. So I'm acquainted with Irma Sadic, our finance minister, Irma Sadic, and her husband Sasha, and his last name is Radic. So it's Radic and Sadic, and I always thought that was so cute. I was like, oh, are you guys? He's like, that's completely normal, Maggie. Every Bosnian name is something. It's
Yes.
Stop thinking it's special. I was like, okay, I'm sorry, but yeah. I think it's charming to keep your name. I think it's also a shame to change it, unless it's something you really don't like. Like, there's some names where it's just, makes problems in your life, which I also understand.
That makes sense. Maggie, I know you as the CEO and the founder of Metropole magazine. But you have many, many, many hats. Maybe we talk about one of them. Or we talk about how did you come to the idea to have Metropole magazine?
That's a great question, because who's crazy enough to found a media company in 2015 when everyone was saying not only is print dead, but the media industry is absolutely, in shambles, and everyone's gonna go broke and it's gonna be terrible. And I was like, oh, found a company. I also didn't study business. I studied philosophy. So and like societal structures and philosophy of economics and stuff like that, which is a little bit kind of like media, because you talk about societies, and what does media talk about? You also talk about society. But and I was a journalist already for 10 years before that, since I was 19. And I founded the company when I was 29. But I basically was seeing over the years before that, I was writing for Die Presse, I was writing for a couple of other outlets, also for the Associated Press. But the Associated Press is part of this media bubble of media agencies, so it's the DPA, Deutsche Presseagentur, AFP, Agence France Presse, the French one, and of course Reuters, we all know the British one. The AP is the Associated Press, the American one, And so like every country kind of has their agencies, and the agencies kind of stay in their little bubble, and they all cover the same stuff, you know. So when OPEC has a conference in Vienna, everybody covers that. When the UN has something going on, you know, all the international news, the obviously international news. But then there's all this stuff that happens here that affects our lives, yours and mine, you know, that is only written about in German. However, you know, half a million people, you know, in this town don't speak German all that well, you know, and at least not well enough to read Der Standard or understand ORF television, you know. So this was the kind of pain I was seeing going on, particularly in those bubbles, in those international bubbles, where people ended up relying on things like, you know, the babysitter's club, you know, or you know, getting their news from their friends at work and things like that, and trying to understand what's going on before they were able to learn German. And as I'll repeat this again, I think it's very important to learn German. Please, people should definitely learn German. But I also know how hard it is, and I know that when you start learning as an adult, some people will never get to the level where they feel comfortable reading about politics or complicated matters in general, news analysis, things like that, or about science, technology, whatever, in German. And I think that's something that just has to be accepted, that there is a lingua franca for international people, and that's English. And so to have a medium in English that provides the news that affects our lives, but is not the stuff that's covered in the international news sphere, was something I saw that gap, and I said, okay, somebody has to fill this gap, and nobody was doing it right. So I decided that I'd try to do it, and I tried to take the approach, kind of. I had started writing about startups for Die Presse, about startups and entrepreneurship in Austria and generally these kind of topics. And I was writing all these stories about these, you know, 20-year-old boys who were getting millions and millions of euros to make like a light up Slinky or something, you know, something completely useless that nobody needed. And so I was like, okay, if this is a thing, if people give people money to do cool things, then I'll just find money and do a cool thing. This can't be that hard, right? I mean, if these little idiots can do it, I can do it too. So yeah, easier said than done, obviously. So I had no business background. I basically bought 30 books about leadership and management and business and how to build a media company and all this kind of stuff. I called up all my friends who knew important people in the media industry, and got meetings with everybody. I hung out with startup CEOs and like asked them all the questions about founding and what I can do wrong and where I'm gonna, and I still made all the mistakes. I mean, there were probably some I didn't make, but it felt like I made all the mistakes. And you make expensive mistakes as well at the beginning. But we in the end, we were not able to get an investor for various reasons. It's another story I'm glad to tell you another time. But we ended up having to bootstrap the company with my savings from my journalism career, which is not much, as you can imagine, and a little bit of money from my co-founder, and then a credit that was a credit we got from the bank. So these were kind of this combination of funds, and we launched the thing. But the main thing that I would make us successful, and what ended up really being the reason that we persevered also through COVID and everything, was that we really, really are interested and care about and are fascinated by our readers. We think they are the coolest people in the world. I mean, I don't have to tell you this, Adela, but maybe your listeners, your viewers want to kind of, I mean, if you think about it, people like you and me, or people like your listeners, international people, you leave a place where you have a network, you speak the language, you understand how the systems work, you understand how community works, you have your family, you know, all these, this whole infrastructure of life, you know, you're up here, right? And you go to the new place and you got nothing, right? And so my goal was to understand them so well that I can help them level up so they can get back to here, you know, in their new home. That was like, okay, this is the process that I want to be there for as a company. And the only thing I know how to do is media, right? I'm not a software engineer. I'm not a relocation agent, you know, I'm not any of these other things, right? So I said, okay, I want to achieve this, and I want to achieve it by being a media company. But nowadays, being a media company doesn't mean just writing words and putting them on paper and selling them to people. It's much more about community and about helping people connect and interact, and also about having certain kinds of opportunities, showing them opportunities to get out of their bubble and these kind of things. So it's really much more of an interaction and a dialogue than it used to be. And I'm really excited to be, first of all, to serve these people that I think are the coolest people in any city, to tell you the truth. Anybody who brings so much, new ideas and new energy into a city, they're the most valuable people in that city, and I get to serve them, and that makes me so proud. but I'm excited that the media industry is at this moment now where it's more than just selling content. It's really selling a state of mind or a community and an understanding of your own life, of your own opportunities. And to be doing that for the coolest people in the cliche is pretty great.
I see the passion, it's like, and not just the American way, because, there's this cliche, the Americans, they will tell you everything, and they will,
I can also be very negative. Trust me. I have the Viennese part as well. I can be very, very negative, but no, when I'm talking about my people, these are this is the reason I get up in the morning. Absolutely.
Yeah. You're balancing into very well, the American and the Viennese. And like, okay, I'm cool. I'm staying grounded. I heard a lot of things that when I interviewed people, that what you said yourself as well. So I interviewed very successful women and men who said that at some point in their career, they were, the managers, they were the leaders in their companies. And then they came to Austria and they thought like, okay, it's going to be very easy. I have international diploma, so I done business, I know this and that. And then it took them, 6 months, 9 months to really wrap it up, to understand, okay, where am I? So how the system works, the language, the people, the community. So, and some of them realized, okay, it's maybe better to start my own company. So because I cannot find any, position over there, or I have to, settle for a very, very low position, a very low paycheck. And where's what's the future over there? So I hear all that we're saying, but I was interviewing people. Go ahead.
But that's funny that you say that, because it's so this is full disclosure. I 2 years before I started Metropole, it was 2013, and I lost my job, my husband, and my apartment in the same 2 weeks. So we had been in a relationship for 10 years. I was very happy until we weren't very happy. And then, and in my job, they closed down my part of the company. It wasn't anything I could do about it. And then I was on the street living in hotels, it was a complete mess. And I got very depressed. And out of this depression, thankfully I had people in my life that were paying attention and that helped me kind of see the light and kind of come out a little bit. But understanding that feeling of desperation, because I was then, of course, arbeitslos, I was at the AMS, as many people who have come here and end up being at some point in time. And I applied for, 20 jobs a week or so, and I didn't once get invited to an interview, not once. And I was just like, is it something I said? Did somebody not like my name? And it got very frustrating. And I thought to myself, and I was writing books and doing all kinds. I was working, during, like, eventually I got tired of being kind of unemployed or whatever. So I said, okay, I'll just, do things that I can do remotely. Like American publishers all wanted to work with me. So I was like, okay, I have a good CV. I have, I have stuff to show for myself. So I was like, I don't know why Austrian companies don't want to hire me. So I realized that later on, nobody hires people that way in Austria. Well, now they do maybe, but at the time they didn't, especially not in the media industry. You have to be a friend of somebody's cousin or something. And that's also fine, because it's quite easy to become a friend of somebody's cousin. It's not difficult, but you have to know that that's what's needed, right? And that's how I got the job at Die Presse. I was at a party, and my friend who was with me at the party introduced me to a young woman. She's like, "Oh, she's an editor. You're an editor. You guys will get along." And I said, hey, so where do you work? She's like, Die Presse. Do you know any writers who want to write about startups? I had never ever heard of startups before in my life. I was a philosophy student. I was writing about oil and nuclear energy before that. So I was like, oh yeah, startups, absolutely. I know everything about startups. Yeah, totally. I could write. And she's like, okay, send me some pitches. So I went home and I Googled, what is a startup? I just literally, I read up a bunch of stuff and I was like, okay, I can figure this out. This is a burgeoning startup industry. I just have to, because that's what journalists do, right? You become an instant expert on whatever topic you have to write about. And yeah, I think that what's needed for people when they're in that situation, when they realize that they were here and they have to start from here, and you have to lose all your pride. You have to just be humble as hell. You just have to go into every situation with complete humility and know and try to look for where's the gap between what I have and what I know and what I would need to have and what I would need to know in order to get where I want to get, right? And be humble about it, because whoever you were back where you are, you aren't that person anymore. You're now somebody else, and you got to do something else to get back to your spot. And being humble is, I think, the key, well, at least the key to my success, but the key to all the success that I've seen all over the startup industry, all over the media industry. The people who were humble when they entered the industry were the ones who were most successful, unless they're corrupt, and then they're just corrupt. But yeah, and that made them successful. But that's a different story. I don't encourage corruption.
Thank you, Maggie, for sharing. So much to say, so we could stay here for hours. But I remember when I was when I was applying for another job, because you said within the company, when I came here, we came without a job, my husband and I. So we packed basically our stuff, we sat on the bus and came here with all the furniture and all the things, utensils that you need in the kitchen, because you don't have money. We saved up for 6 months. So, and that's why, it's like a super small apartment, super small place. And then we said, okay, we give it a try. So, we have 6 months, we give it a try, and I don't want to live instead thinking, oh, okay, we could do this and we could have done that and and then not move from the place. So we had decent jobs back in Sarajevo. So we know that we were, flying, going away from something. So we were going towards opportunities. We wanted to grow more, because we said we just don't see ourselves here anymore, and we give it a try. So it was a fun ride at the beginning. And as you said yourself, when you come here, you're a different person. It's like, I came here, I don't speak the language, the first thing. I know a couple of words, then I'm thinking, okay, where should I apply? Can I all apply to this? I spent days, sitting in the apartment, just like looking through the jobs, and I was like, okay, I don't, no, and then you just filter, you start talking to yourself, and you just filter things like, okay, this might work or this might work. And what worked in my case basically back then was going to a job fair. My friend of a friend told me, like, there's this yearly event called Career Calling. It's mostly for the students and young professionals, I think, juniors. And I never went to a job fair like that. So I just said, okay, let's go. And I didn't want to go. I hated it. And I was like, okay, I don't want to go. There's like printing. You have your, that was back in 2013. You said it was still paper. So you print your CVs, you need a picture, and you dress up and you go all day long, and you just, meet companies, and you just present yourself and so on and so forth. And so long list of questions. And basically I say luck, because, I came there and saw the company that I knew the brand, the Tele2 that I was working for. So I knew the brand from Croatia, not that they're a Swedish company, and the whole story in the background. And I just went over there because I just love their story, the black sheep being different and so on. So standing out, and that's how I basically got the job. So I went there and I showed them my CV. And I said, this is what I've been working, and this is what I have. And I don't speak German that well. I speak English and I speak a little bit of German. I'm learning. They said, oh, perfectly fine. We just, it's our company language is German, so we English, so we will pay you the German classes. So don't worry about that.
Yeah. I think that's the other thing, if you go in with complete honesty and complete understanding of your own skill set, then nobody's gonna hold it against you that you don't speak German yet. Nobody's gonna hold it against you that your connections are, unless you're in sales maybe, but but in the Austrian market. But it's something that people are, people have this barrier, and I totally understand it. Everyone does have this barrier of, it's a self-esteem thing. It's like you said, you didn't want to go to that fair. You didn't want to, you didn't want to do that because it's humiliating, right? You don't want you don't want to feel like a student, you know, I already have a career, I already did my part, you know, like I don't need to do this anymore. But when you're in a new place, you have to just get rid of all your pride, crumple it up, throw it in the trash can, and just, you know, be the new you, and embrace it. Because if you don't, you're going to waste a lot of time feeling sorry for yourself.
Yeah.
And that can really, first of all, get you depressed, but also really doesn't do anything for your family or your kids or whatever your environment is when you're where you're living. So I think your story is so emblematic of what people need to do. Absolutely. Just put yourself out there and don't have any allures, as they say.
And some of my guests said we need to put food on the table. So on the other hand, so they were CEOs in their home country, and then they came here and they just were giving away the flyers, and nobody was looking to hire them because of many reasons. And at the end of the day, they said, I need to put the food on the table. And most of the people so don't have, you know, this someone to back them up, you know. It's like 1 or 2 months or like 6 months whatsoever.
There's no safety net,
and that's it. So if you fall back, that's it. You're not employed, so you have other things to, you know, you wake up with different priorities in your life.
You know, that's what my mom said to me recently. You know, she's now retired. Thankfully for her, she took her time with retiring, but she you know, she's my biggest entrepreneurial inspiration. You know, she reinvented her career 5 times since we moved to Austria, because she needed to make it work. She needed to make our lives work because she had no choice. You know, she was just like, she said to me, if it weren't for you guys, I don't think I would have done all this stuff, you know, because you guys, I looked at your little faces and I had to make it the best world possible for you, you know? Yeah. And, you know, I'm tearing up just saying it, but, you know, but it's but it's just, you know, that's I think that's something that parents understand, but it's also something that it's important to understand about yourself. You know, it's worthwhile to do that for yourself as well. And I think that's every parent knows what it's like to look at your kids and say, I got to put food on the table. And it's harder sometimes not to feel self-pity when it's just you, or, you know, and therefore maybe it's more of a kind of a mantra thing. If you're a single career person, or a person who's in a relationship but don't have kids or anything, it's important to realize that you're valuable enough and you're important enough to fight to have the best life for yourself, you know. Absolutely. And give your all.
Give your all in. Maggie, we touched a couple of things, you know, what is important to succeed here. You said, you know, cousin of a cousin of a cousin, or, you know, the language. Is there anything else that you would like, that you saw through your career or through your networks, of what works the best for people who are planning to move to Austria or already here?
I have a secret that I'm gonna tell you and your listeners, but I'm not sure Austrians are aware of this. So don't tell the Austrians. But basically, being really good at your job is very, very rare here. So yeah, because of this whole cousins of a cousin thing, right? So you have people that are in their position forever and a day, who are not very good at it, right? So when you're applying for a job, if you can demonstrate your skill, and this is about selling yourself, you know, in the sense of like showing, really demonstrating your skills, in a way that is not just adequate, but shiny and new and exciting and beautiful and colorful and happy and awesome, you will succeed. Like that, there is no German requirement for skills. Like if you want to go into e-commerce and you can show them that you are able to create a conversion workflow that will be 20 times, 20% more efficient than the current workflow that they're using, then say, please allow me access to your system. I'll demonstrate that I can make you 20% more. You know, show people how good you are, because Austrians are not used to that. And when they see it, it surprises them and it delights them and it makes them happy, and they'll want to have you in their company. It's a very American thing to do. In America, everybody does this. Every employment interview that people have is full of, you know, what would you do if you said this? You know, these typical like consulting company interviews, right? Like there's an elevator and there are 50 floors, and if you have to get out there, you know, like these kind of weird puzzles, right? But in Austrian interviews, there aren't usually those kind of questions as much. They're very job specific questions, and therefore preparing something that you can really demonstrate in the interview is definitely. And I know this when I interview people, when they have something prepared, they say, "Well, I really thought about it, and actually I made a breakdown here. Here's a link to the landing page that I created to show you how I would optimize your UX." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I love you," because you don't see that so often. And that's something that I think we expats, I guess, or whatever you want to call us, we internationals are much better at, because we're used to having to translate the way we think into a different mindset. And that's an asset that we could totally use in the job market. So whatever it is that you want to, be career-wise or whatever expertise you have, make that as visible as possible. That's my big secret, because the Austrians don't do it. I'm just, like not that they don't know how to do it, they probably do, but they just don't do this kind of demonstrative thing.
Yeah.
And so you can really stand out if you visually show how good you are.
Thank you, Maggie, for sharing the secret. I had to laugh because one of my guests from Iran did a very similar thing in his job. So he was sharing these flyers, and then he saw the promo marketing materials and said, "Wow, but that doesn't look really well. I can do it better." So because he had the background in that, so that was his business background.
In graphic design,
yes.
Oh wow, okay.
And so he went home and did a redesign. So he came up with a couple of ideas, went back to the company, and they said, "Yeah, that looks really good." And so they hired him. And then later on, he realized, well, if I can do that for them, I can do that as well as my running my own company. So now he runs his own marketing agency.
Oh, that's great. But this is exactly the kind of thing, sometimes it's also, I worked for 6 years as a waitress. I wrote for travel blogs. I wrote for travel magazines, websites, wrote a couple of very, blah, blah, blah travel guides, Sissi and Mozart and all that stuff. But you have to do the grunt work of whatever career you're in. You have to do the dirty work. When you arrive, nobody's going to hire you to do the fun stuff. Because you're not the kind of a cousin, and it's just the way it is.
Thank you, Maggie, so much for joining us and sharing your insights. I really love this conversation. I feel very energized after this. I hope I will get some sleep.
It's great to talk to you, Adela. It's something I love talking with people like you who've had the chutzpah to make a new life for themselves. I think it's really, really inspiring.
Thank you so much. Before we wrap up, I usually ask people, what do they read? Is there any book or that you would like to recommend?
Well, I mean, if we have leaders, my house is full of books. I can't even show you. But actually, right now, because I'm building, also a secret, I'm building a new company right now that's going to work together with my existing company. And also we're growing as a company, and we're kind of, a lot of people are moving kind of from management level to like C-level at Hometown Media. And I'm reading this fantastic book that I would recommend to any CEO or creative leader, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Kim Scott's super awesome. She worked at Twitter, Google, and Apple. I mean, the dream, right? I don't know, the trifecta of crazy. But her book is Radical Candor. Don't forget it. It's really, really amazing. It's about, how do you get the best out of your teams? How do you inspire your teams to do the best work of their lives? It is so smart and so well constructed as a concept. I mean, it's kind of like you read it and you're like, of course, but nobody does it, right? Like, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And it changed the way I think about leadership. Absolutely.
I'm just thinking out loud that you started writing about startups and now you're just building one company after another. Isn't that right? Because
what goes around comes around.
Yeah. Be careful, people. If someone else used to write about startup, you might end up starting your own company. Thank you, Maggie, so much for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for listening, liking, subscribing, and commenting. So I will link Maggie's contact details and, of course, the link to the Metropole magazine. So, yeah, thank you for tuning for today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.